The most common question I get asked as a tuner is, how do you learn how to tune? People want to get into it, they want to learn the ways, they want to start a business doing tuning, and they're asking me this question, and my first answer is don't. But if you must, I'm going to show you basically a couple of categories that you need to check off before you're doing it, especially if you're doing this as a business and you're charging people money. The first thing is you have to have a ground level understanding of how these systems work. It's easy to say, well, just get into HP tuners and, take a class on HP tuners. No. Why? Because you have to know how the system works. And HP tuners doesn't really tell you how the system works. That's where you can get online and get books from guys like Greg Banish and Ben Strader that are going to explain aftermarket fuel injection systems. And one of the things that they're going to do early on is they're going to explain how everything works together. They're going to explain AFR. They're going to explain the inputs and outputs, how fuel pressure affects the injectors. Right? Here's Lambda. Here's scaling on Lambda. They're going to talk about what all the different sensors do and how they work together. Because if you don't know what speed density is, then what are you doing modifying the table? If you don't know how mass airflow is calculated, what do you do in modifying the table? You need a book that's going to tell you the basics. Okay, here's a couple that you can find on Amazon or wherever. There's a Greg Banish. He's aged a little since then. That's a good starting place. Now, if you're working with fuel injection systems that are aftermarket, the next thing that I'm going to recommend that you get into is Holley FI training classes or a similar system. And it's not because they're going to teach you how to tune. They kind of will. Tom and those guys are very good. However, they're going to start with teaching you how the system should be put together, including the wiring, making sure you have sufficient wiring, radio noise, everything else, because it matters. And the last thing you want to do is be trying to tune a vehicle, and they didn't run the power in the ground to the battery, and you're having some faults, you're having some issues, and you don't know why, and you're chasing your tail because you didn't know to do that, even though it says it in the instructions. They will beat it into your head. They will talk about a lot of other stuff. And when you take their course, you're going to get tons of manuals, and they're going to even do some hands-on training, and they're going to explain everything. Once you have this ground level of understanding of how they work and how they should be installed, right? Because honestly, about half the stuff we tune has a mechanical issue. That's why you need that ground level understanding. Once you have that, then you can get into the specifics, and there's a lot of options available. The oldest is that I know of is the Tuning School, and there's also Lasota Racing. Okay, so you can visit them. There's Horsepower Academy. There's a few others out there. EFI Academy, I think it is, or EFI Tuning. And then the last one that has kind of come up here lately is Elite Tuned. I went to one of their seminars. I was reasonably impressed with their material, and I think that they're a solid option. So I believe those guys were the Vengeance Racing tuners for a long time, and now they're out on their own doing email type tuning and doing this training course. So that is a good option to look at. Now, once you've done all of that and you have an idea of what you're doing, you can also visit the HP Tuners forums, and they will help you if you have problems. You can also look into different things. They will explain a lot of stuff because you're going to run into problems when you do it. But when you're done with all of that, the next thing you need to do, surprisingly, is actually just basic research. There's a lot of things to look at so that you can see and understand what you should expect when you're tuning. For example, Richard Holdner, he's on YouTube, right? I've got books here from before he was all over YouTube where he does a lot of AB dyno testing, and you can see how systems work together, long tube versus short tube, different types of supercharger, etc. And that will give you an understanding of how the system should be working so that when you're dialing them in on the dyno, you kind of know what to expect before you get there. You can also find tons of articles from even way back in the day. Here's an old 5.0 Mustang. I didn't care anything about Mustangs when I bought this, but it talks about return fuel systems and E85 tuning science. Important stuff to know. And this was, again, this came out in 2013, so that's 12 years ago. And E85 was really just kind of becoming mainstay. So you can find a lot of information if you just look. But here's the one thing that I absolutely will tell you if you're going to get into this profession. I see a lot of startup tuners. They'll tune their own thing, and then they think they're good, and they'll start charging people. And when they have a problem, they have to ask about very basic problems because they didn't do any of this. I understand people have to start somewhere, but if you're not willing to do your due diligence, put some money into some training, and have a good understanding, besides I've tuned a couple of vehicles, before you start charging people, because understand you can burn down somebody's project that they put all of their savings into or all of their hard-earned money and cost that person a lot of money and create a very bad situation for yourself very quickly. You need as much information as possible before you start doing this. I wish I had done more of that. I felt like I did a adequate amount because I intended to learn to do this for myself and had years looking into this before I ever touched a vehicle. I still don't think I was fully prepared. Okay, so make sure you're doing that, because honestly, it's a pet peeve when somebody starts tuning and they call me and their question is, well, how do I do da-da-da? And I'm like, that's basic. You're charging people and you don't know how to do this? I'm not talking about advanced stuff. I'm talking about the basic. The next thing that I'm going to tell you is that you either want to rent or potentially buy a dyno or spend a lot of time somewhere where you get feedback. You need a wideband, right? You need to be reading spark plugs. And you need some sort of feedback, because what you think matters may not. It is very easy to say, well, if this is this, then more is this. You need a feedback loop. You need something to tell you whether you're right or wrong. And if you just say, well, a little more timing is going to make it faster, and you may kill the power, or you may have so much ping that the car slows down. You have to have a feedback loop to tell you if that's accurate or not. So that's also very important. Any questions about anything I've gone over, ask in the comments or shoot me a message. Hopefully this helps somebody. But again, my first response is simply don't get into this. It is a pain in the butt like you would not believe. But if you must, this is how you do it.